Hello, I'm George, and in this video lesson I'm going to show you how to use the marvelous mixer brush to turn a photograph into a painting. And you can see here that it's been simplified. We've got lots of different types of brush strokes. I'll just zoom in there, and it's more abstract here on the horse. We've got a smoother tip for the girl's hair and a much more abstract tip again for the background, because it's less important to get these details nice and clear. So you get this lovely paint effect by using the mixer brush, and all it's doing is it's picking up colours from the original photograph and combining them with the new bristle brush tips to create these amazing strokes that you can see here. But we'll kick off by producing something like this, just to show you how to customize the mixer brush, how to combine it with various brush tips, and how to create different looks like this wet oil painted look that we have here. And we can use the mouse for this shot here, and we're going to use a Wacom stylus for this shot here, because you can change the type of stroke as you change the pressure. But we'll kick off with something simple to start with. So we're going to have a little play with the mixer brush by creating a blank document. Go to File, New, and create a transparent document, and then you can change the workspace to something more suitable for painting by clicking up here, and then that gives you access to the swatches, so you can pick up colours from here like a palette. You can also change the bristle tips once you've selected the bristle brush, and we're going to do that now by going here in the Tools palette, and instead of the brush tool, go right down to the bottom and we get the mixer brush tool. And here you can see we've got the bristle brush tips. They've all got different styles, and if you click here you'll get a preview of the brush up here as well in this little preview window. And as you click and spray, you can see the direction that the bristles are going in thanks to this little animation. If you click, it dabs, so that's a good way of being able to preview what the brush tip looks like and what it's actually doing. I'm going to press Alt and Control Z a couple of times just to go back through history, and I'm going to show you how to turn on this preview, because you might need to enable it from your preferences. So I'm going to go to Preferences, I'm going to go to Performance, and up pops the preference window, and then you need to tick Enable OpenGL Drawing to see that little preview, and that only works with certain graphics cards, so it may not be able to be ticked, but if it can be, then click it, click OK, and you'll get this little preview like so. Okay, let's select a brush tip like this third one here, or the fourth one down, and what we're going to do is just change the colour here by clicking and choosing a nice bright red, and I'll show you how to modify the type of brush stroke you get by popping up to this new section in the options bar. If we click here and go to dry light load, you'll notice that these settings change. The load is 5%, and if you just increase the brush tip size as well, let's go for something a little larger. It will depend on the size of your document as to what size of tip you need to use, but if I click and drag with the mouse, you can see, because it's a light load, that the paint runs out quite quickly and it's a very short stroke. So if we change that now to dry and heavy load, watch these change. It's 100% on the load now. Click and drag. I'll do the same length stroke up to about here, and this time we've got more paint loaded on the brush and we get a longer stroke. We can now change the foreground colour to something else, and I'll show you how to mix different colours together. Let's go for a yellow. Click here, and now with a dry brush, if you click and stroke over like so, it doesn't really mix, and you'll notice that the mix option is greyed out. But if we change it to something like wet, very wet and heavy mix, and do the same sort of stroke, click and drag, and you can see this time it's mixing between the foreground colour in the Tools palette and the colours in the picture, and you've got a much more realistic oil painting like stroke, which looks much wetter than our dry stroke. And you'll notice mix is now on 100 instead of totally greyed out or at 0. So you can change the mix to change the blending between the foreground colour and the colours in the image itself. And using those settings you can create a very wet looking oil painting like this. If you want to create a border, just hold the shift key down, click, and then click again, and because you've got the shift key it will draw a straight line between the 2 points, and that's a great way of bashing out a border very quickly. But we're going to move on and have a look at something a little bit more complicated. We'll take this start image here, which is called Mixer Before, and I'll show you how to create a painting effect with something a little bit more complicated like this image here. Press D to set the foreground colour to its default black and the background colour is white, and then click here in the Layers palette to add a new transparent layer. We can tick Sample All Layers at the top here, so we can sample the colours from the layer below but paint onto this transparent layer. And what we're going to do is grab this brush here, which is Round, Blunt, Medium, Stiff, and that gives you a nice 100% mix, which means we're only going to be sampling colours from the photograph and not using the foreground colour for the moment. Choose a very wet, heavy mix, and let's just choose a nice larger brush tip there so we can paint over the horse to start with. Then you can set the brush tip size by clicking up here and choosing something like 50 pixels, and then when you click and spray on the horse, you'll notice that we're creating smoother looking strokes and they're looking more like paint strokes. It takes a little while for the strokes to catch up with what I'm actually doing because this is quite intensive on RAM, especially when I'm recording this as a video. So I'm just going to stop for a second there. You can see the strokes are appearing, and because there are bristle brushes you get nice lines there in the strokes. If I just click and spray in this area here, it samples whatever you click on, and as you drag the mouse it will then extend that with a wet look and a little bit of white here, and that's a cool way of creating a more natural oil painting like effects. Now there's some other options to show you. Let me just do a little bit of this brown area here once it's caught up. You can also see on here you're starting to show the pixels that we're painting. Let me just click and spray with my Wacom brush tip just to create a nice soft stroke, and we're getting previews of the direction and the intensity as it's dabbing and spraying like so. Now there's some other options at the top here, like these two here. This one loads with every new stroke. It samples a new color from the picture, and this one cleans the brush after every stroke. So if I turn this one off, we get a rather messy looking brush. If I click and spray on here just to create a more abstract looking harness, then you'll get these green streaks. And because we've turned off the clean brush option, when I click and spray on another area, there's going to be a little bit of green paint clinging to my brush tip. So let me just wait for this to finish dabbing, and then once it's caught up with me, I'm going to then start to spray here. And there should be a little bit of green there. Yes, there is. So the brush is a little bit dirty, and we've got a little bit of a green stroke there. So I can actually keep spraying over that to get rid of that. And that just gives you more realistic looking painting accidents, because it's a little bit more realistic. If you don't pop the brush in the water and then clean it with your fingers, you'll end up with extra colours appearing like so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this back on because I don't really want to have green strokes with the brown. But it does show you some of the more powerful options there that you can fine tune to create more realistic and natural looking paint effects. So we've jumped through time, and this is how the horse is shaping up. There's the before, there's the after, and it's much more stylized now. But to do the mane, I'm going to modify my brush tip by clicking up here to open the brushes panel. I'm going to change the shape of my brush tip to round angle. I'm going to take down the bristle amount as well to around about 9% or so. There we go. So we've got a much lighter and sparser bristle tip. Click here to close that up, and then what we're going to do is alt click to sample some of the main color. I'm going to take the mix down to about 83% so we get some of that sample color, and then what we can do is just click and spray to start smearing the mane using this new modified brush tip. If I control plus to zoom in, and then space bar to get the hand tool, and you can start to see these stylized hairs appearing as we click and spray. For stronger strokes, if you click load and drag to the right there, you can add 100% to put more paint onto the brush tip. Let's click here for a black brush, and if we take the mix to 84%, as I say, you'll now get a bit of black mixing with the colours of the pony's mane, and that will help you draw more effective strokes. And after a while you should end up with something that looks like this. There's the before, and there's the more simplified, more paint-like after. I've added a couple of extra strokes in just to create some distinctive brush tip hairs. Moving on, it's worth creating a new layer to paint in the girl, and you can then use a brush like this, which is round, fan, stiff, thin bristles, and that's great for creating a nice smooth collection of hairs on the girl's head, like so. And you can see a different tip on this particular preview here. So once you've painted in the girl's delicate details using a fairly small brush tip, you can then create a new layer and use a larger, more bristlier brush to paint in a more abstract background like so. Once you've done that, we're then ready to add indentations to the brush strokes to make them more realistic by clicking on the top layer, pressing Shift, Control, Alt and E at the same time, and that stamps them together into a flattened layer. You've still got the other layers below if you need them later on, and what we're going to do is apply a filter to this top layer by going to Filter, going down to Stylize and choosing Emboss. Then up pops the Emboss window. If you set the angle to 135, height to 9, amount to 81 and click OK, you should get some nice embossed edges which we can use to create the illusion of thick ridges of paint. It's always worth desaturating this particular layer first of all, just to get rid of any colours. So go to Image, Adjustments and choose Desaturate to get a proper grayscale layer. That gets rid of any colour in that particular layer, and then click on it and change the layer blending mode to Overlay, and only the darker strokes will appear and they'll give you that indented effect. If I just Control plus to zoom in a wee bit more, and then we'll see a preview of our brush strokes. If I turn this overlay off, there you go, fairly flat. Turn it on again and you get these nice ridges of the brush strokes. So that's how you create a painting from a photograph using the mixer brush. One last tip, if you don't want this little brush tip preview, you can always click on this icon to turn it off.